This is Duke University.
Besides being the first black president and the current U.S. president, Barack Obama is also what authors Samy Alim and Geneva Smitherman call a style shifter. Today, we're joined by Stanford professor Samy Alim to talk about the new book that he co-authored with Geneva Smitherman, Articulate While Black, a book that looks at the president's use of the English language. And later, we're joined by singer-songwriter Allison Crockett, who talks about her new album, Mommy, What's a Depression? My name is Mark Anthony Neal, and this is Left to Black.
Yeah. Eric, you're a real live G for this one. Yeah.
Good afternoon and welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal, and we are joined from Stanford University by Samy Alim, who's professor of education, anthropology, and linguistics at Stanford, where he directs the Center for Race, Ethnicity, and Language and the Institute for Diversity in the Arts. He is the author of several books, including You Know My Steez, an ethnographic and sociolinguistic study of style shifting in a Black American speech community. That's Duke University Press, 2004. And also Rock the Mic, the language of hip hop culture. That's Routledge, 2006. But he's joining us today to talk about his brand new book, Articulate While Black, Barack Obama, Language and Race in the U.S., which was co-written with the legendary Geneva Smitherman. How are you doing today, Sammy?
Excellent, man. It's excellent. Great to be here, Mark.
So in some ways, this is a president in which we can't help talk about language.
Right.
I can remember Jimmy Carter back in 1970, and I was a youngster then, but you know, folks went on and on about his Southern accent, his Southern dialect. You know, we can go back to when Alfred E. Smith was running for president back in 1928, and folks on the West Coast didn't know what to do with that kind of hard Jewish accent, that hard New Yorker accent, right? And in some ways, he lost the election then because of the way that he sounded, right? He sounded foreign. But then we get Barack Obama, and what we see is someone who's not just marked by language, but an incredible capacity to code switch, you know, in ways that we've never ever seen, you know, amongst an American president. So talk a little bit, particularly given your research interest, about how you got interested in thinking about, you know, Barack Obama shapeshifter / style shifter / code switcher, you know, particularly in terms of language.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on, Mark. I think one of the things that people noticed immediately about Barack Obama, especially during the campaign, was his ability to switch styles or code switch, what we refer to in the text as either code switching, but really we talk about it as style shifting. Yeah. This idea that we could shift styles. And you think about it vocally, if you think about sort of your voice box as a gearbox, you can shift styles as you shift gears whenever it's necessary, whenever it's appropriate, whenever you're trying to reach a particular constituency. And Barack Obama does that, I would say, you know, better than most candidates that we've seen. And so my interest in this comes from working with Black communities back to when I was in Philadelphia, studying sort of these educational and race issues and crises that would come up, like the Oakland Ebonics controversy, et cetera. And it was so obvious to me, right, that many Black speakers had these different styles and would shift in and out of them, right? And the goal was to show this as a linguistic ability, right, not as a deficiency, right? And so from there, and working, of course, with Geneva Smitherman on issues of hip hop culture and et cetera, and seeing this linguistic ability, this linguistic dexterity over and over again in many different contexts, we just have never really seen it in terms of American politics to this extent. We have seen it in other cases, but what Barack Obama is able to do is take it to the next level.
Yeah. You know, many folks were first introduced to Barack Obama on a national scale, the 2004 DNC, right, when he gives the keynote address. And there were all kinds of remarks about his language. And then, you know, his future vice president would hit a fine note on it, right, when he talked about, you know, he's different because he's so articulate.
Right.
Unpack for a little bit, because of course you use that concept, you know, in the title, and there's not, you know, a professional Black person in this country that at some point in their career hasn't been described by their white peers and their white colleagues as being articulate. You know, what does it mean to describe a Black presidential candidate as articulate? As if Jesse Jackson wasn't articulate, as if Al Sharpton, you know, wasn't articulate.
Right.
You know,
no, that's exactly it. So So in this, we're not just talking about Barack Obama's language, we're also talking about America's response to Barack Obama's language. So we analyze from a linguistic standpoint how Barack Obama talks, but also how we talk about the way Barack Obama talks, right? And one of the biggest controversies that we look at is this articulate controversy, right? And I think it's important to note that Barack Obama himself did not fall prey to being the sort of exceptional Negro, which is what this articulate controversy is about. He points out Jesse Jackson and other candidates as being articulate, right? And so one of the best lines out of Reverend Al Sharpton in relation to this articulate controversy was, he very concisely put it, I take a bath every day. Right? And people didn't necessarily get that, but what he was talking about was the way people link articulate with clean, with bright, with handsome, with attractive. And this happened with Barack Obama over and over again over the last 5 years. And it continues, Mark. Even on some Romney websites, we see the pros and cons of Obama and Romney being discussed. And one of Obama's pros, obviously, is that he's articulate and he's smart and he's bright, things that would obviously never be mentioned about Mitt Romney.
Right. You're watching Left of Black, and we're joined by H. Samy Alim, who's a professor of education, anthropology, and linguistics at Stanford, where he also directs the Center for Race, Ethnicity, and Language, and also the Institute for Diversity. He's the author with Geneva Smitherman of the brand new book, Articulate While Black, Barack Obama, Language and Race in the U.S., which was published by Oxford University Press. Talk a little bit, Samy, because in some ways, any folks who are doing work in linguistics, particularly around race and black folks, you know, you've worked with Geneva Smitherman at some point, because she's just that legendary of a figure. Talk a little bit about what it was like working with her. You know, some of us have had the experience of being with Dr. G off stage, and know about her colorful use of language, etc. You know, what did that look like when you're working together, collaborating on a book project?
Well, Dr. G definitely embodies what she studies. I will say that, right? She comes at it linguistically, and I'll say for me, this was a very personal collaboration. It's not just a dream come true in terms of Dr. G as sort of an intellectual founder and pioneer, more than a mentor, right, to a lot of people. So it's a dream to be able to work with her intellectually on these issues. But I reached out to Dr. G, and this just shows you what kind of person she is, what kind of scholar, what kind of mentor she is, to be as busy and as on top of the game as she is. I sent her my honors thesis as an undergraduate. This is 15 years ago or more, right? And I sent it to her, not really expecting anything, just being like, man, your work really helped me articulate what I needed to say here, and it made it possible to do what I want to do here in Philadelphia with black students, et cetera. This is where I was at the time. And I really thanked her, and she sent me back an entire packet of books and articles, and I mean hardcover, man. So here I am as an undergrad receiving all this stuff from the legendary Dr. G and thinking about it, but more important than the books and the articles, which I tore right into, was the note that she had with it, which was very personal, and it really touched me. It talked about needing scholarly work and the kind of work that we do and how important that it is, and that there's potential for me to also participate in this scholarly community, right, and to use our scholarship in ways to sort of advance social justice, et cetera. It was a really important moment, and then being able to interact with her all these years throughout, she has always been there, right? And so the moment came where we were just chopping it up about this, and Barack Obama, we were talking about his speeches. I had gone to some of his speeches. She had witnessed it. And we started talking about all these language issues that were flaring up, that it was a natural. It was sort of like, gee, we got to do this book. We got to do it. And of course, she was down.
One of the things that's a real joy in reading Articulate While Black, as you're talking about Barack Obama's style shifting, you and Dr. G engage in a fair amount of style shifting yourself.
We trafficked it in, like you said.
You know, to the extent, I mean, you can almost feel palpably on the page how much fun you're having with it. And in some ways, it reflects the way that, you know, particularly black professionals who engage in this style shifting, you know, do in fact enjoy the surprise and shock that they elicit, you know, when they're able to shift in certain kind of places and it's unexpected, right?
There are some things in that book that might hit some people in the face with a frying pan, right, when they see it, right? But it's the kind of way that we expressed ourselves in this book was we were being us. You know what I'm saying? Like we weren't trying to fit into a particular mode all the time. We have the academic lingo down, right? But we also have this way that we talk and this way that we relate to each other. So some of the stuff that we would say, we co-wrote a lot of this on Skype, right? And some of the stuff that we would say that would just come out on the fly,
You put
would
it in.
end up being written into the prose. And of course, as you know, Mark, it goes without saying that writing in this kind of way, right, shifting, etc., that's one of Dr. G's incredible linguistic, stylistic, and substantive hallmarks, right? She let a whole entire generation of scholars know that the linguistic is political, that writing is a political act, and it's not just about the content, it's about the form, right? And so in many ways, if we're gonna write about style shifting, right, and this is an act that we engage in our daily lives, we're also gonna represent that in our text, right? We think that's really important, especially the way sort of society is moving now is starting to get into an understanding of the importance of bilingual consciousness, multiple language varieties, et cetera. So now is sort of the time, right, to make people even more aware of that.
You're watching Left of Black. We're joined this afternoon by Samy Alim, who's a professor of education, anthropology, and linguistics at Stanford University. He is the co-author of the new book, Articulate While Black, Barack Obama, Language and Race in the United States. Of the book, Michael Eric Dyson says, Articulate While Black brilliantly dissects the politics of language as embedded in the politics of race. The beautiful thing about the book is that it breaks down Obama's oral signifying and helps us to navigate the complexities of Black linguistic habits and the complications of the Black rhetoric writ large. Talk a little bit, Samy, because I think there are moments in the book that are very illuminating when you really get to the, you know, the dirty, the seriousness of when Obama is engaged with Black folks and in Black institutions, and the slippery ways that he codes his language, literally, to say that, you know, it's not just that I'm Black, right, but we literally come from the same kind of space, right? Eat the same kind of food, have sat in the same kind of churches. Talk a little bit about some of those moments that you detail in the book.
I think some of the moments that are really important for me are some that actually people don't realize even happen. Right. One of the things when we talked with Americans and we surveyed folks, we realized that there was a different reading of Barack Obama depending on which Barack Obama you saw. Right. So there's two critical moments that I think capture Barack Obama's use of Black language in ways that signal things to the Black community, right, or to many in the Black community. And that's, in general, the way we use language. This is why we focus in the book on languaging race, right? The way we use language oftentimes hints at our political ideologies, our racial loyalties, our class identities, our gender, where we stand. And people are constantly reading you, how you talk, and they're looking for signs of where is this guy at, right? Where is he at? And we can tell by the way that they speak, right, for the most part. So an interview that is rarely talked about that I love, right? And when I saw it, I was like, wow, okay, this says something about Barack Obama, right? Was an interview with Diddy that he did years ago, right? That Diddy posted on his site. And it shows Barack Obama engaging in the act of signifying, right? And knowing how to engage in signifying. So they're doing this interview and they're going at it on political issues. And Barack Obama makes his points and he's making points. And Diddy jumps in with, he making sense. He's making sense right now. He's talking all kinds of stuff. He's making sense. This is what we need to hear, et cetera, et cetera. Then Barack keeps going, right? And maybe he starts sweating a little bit. And so Diddy's talking and he starts saying, I'm so cool. Look, I'm so cool. I'm not even sweating. Everybody else here is sweating. So he's signifying on Barack. And Barack jumps in. Oh, look, he wearing a T-shirt. Look, he wearing a T-shirt. He takes off his jacket, right, and says that's because he makes all those designy, fancier clothes, these fancy designer clothes, et cetera, right? And so he gives it up to him and says, well, he's good, folks. We got to give it to him. We got to give it to him. So that exchange, that interaction, not only to the hip-hop community, but to, you know, to Black folks who are watching, to other folks who are watching, signaled a little something about Barack that he can get down in a signifying sense,
right.
which he's done ever since. But the other one that I want to make sure to mention is that speech in South Carolina that Barack gave in front of a predominantly black audience,
right,
where he literally took him to church, man. Like, he literally took him to church. He was strutting across the stage slowly in the way that preachers do, right? He damn near took out a handkerchief, right? But he was strutting across the stage. And then he gets into this amazing call and response that people have seen over and over again. I'm not talking about the call and response that happens when he's on, you know, on the tour.
On tour. Right.
Right? I'm talking about a different kind of call and response. That was the caller and the responder were completely blurred, right? And he says, "Don't let them fool you." That's right. They want to tell you Barack Obama's a Muslim. Yes, they do, right? And all this stuff goes back and forth. And then he quotes, right, Malcolm X. They want to bamboozle you. They want to hoodwink you.
Right.
And the audience gave him hoodwink, and he gave it back. So it was this mutual thing where you had to actually know a little bit about the rhetorical and cultural history, right, of Black Americans, of Malcolm X, of the speaking patterns, to be able to engage. And you can see the difference in the white audience members and the black audience members in terms of their participation. Those kinds of things, the signifying and the preaching, right, signaled to black audiences, accurately or not, that Barack Obama was sort of down with this political ideology in the community.
And it raises some interesting questions, right? Because, you know, whenever I read work like this, I immediately think about the work of James C. Scott, Domination in the Arts of Resistance, and this whole idea of hidden transcripts and public transcripts. And so there's an argument, right? Those of us who, you know, want to read Barack Obama's presidency in a certain kind of way are really invested in this idea that they are legitimate hidden transcripts that we can read in him that speaks in ways that connect to the kind of politics that we want him to have. How effective do you think he has been in connecting with black audiences around this kind of linguistic community, these stylistic aspects of language, particularly when there's a disconnect between his actual policies in terms of the black community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. So according to what we show in the book and how Americans respond to Barack Obama, many African Americans respond positively to his language use, right? Saying that he uses this kind of preacher mode, his pausing, his intonation, he tells stories, he's able to connect with us, et cetera, right? And that's a positive reading, right? But there has been cases, and there have been cases like, for example, the Father's Day speech. Right, where there's a different kind of signal being given out, right? And Barack was criticized for that. So where he sort of took black private discourses about fatherhood and responsibility and basically put them on blast on the public microphone, right? He got sort of chastised for speaking to white voters, not to black voters, right? So even though he was using black private discourses in the public sphere, right, people sort of read his main audience as being perhaps the white audience, right? He was speaking in that particular way. And there's one little footnote I want to add to this is that people talk about Barack Obama speaking familiarly black, right, in black ways of speaking, and how that's really important to the black electorate. It's also incredibly important to the white electorate, which is what we found out. So it's not just that black folks were relating to Barack because he spoke a little bit of black language or style shift in important ways. White folks, too, in hearing Barack Obama speak this way, were not necessarily turned off in the way that some of the conservatives might have been. But speaking in a particular way, white folks dig black style and black speech and were able to relate to that. But importantly, it also not made Barack familiarly black, it made him familiarly American and familiarly Christian.
Interesting, right.
So here's a person whose Americanness is being completely questioned over and over again. Citizenship is key. And also whose religion.
Right.
Constantly questioned, no matter how many times he says it. So speaking in a familiarly black way, especially the preacher tradition, Americanized and Christianizes
him,
in a way that he's no longer the African socialist, and he's no longer the demon terrorist, right, this Muslim crazy terrorist, but he's also now, in a weird way, right, in a counterintuitive way, being familiarly black is also being familiarly American, familiarly Christian, right? And so it's very nuanced, these kind of discriminatory discourses of race, of citizenship, and religion, and language, all come together for Barack in this analysis.
And in some ways, you can imagine that for young white voters, right, who've grown up listening to hip hop for 20 years. It also was a performance of authenticity for them, right? That he was authentically black for them, right?
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Because there's, as we know, there are multiple ways of being
right.
as you know, right? But for the hip hop audience, it did definitely signal a particular kind of blackness that they could relate to. I mean, the whole Jeezy controversy and the Jeezy, discussion was huge in that case. Yeah.
You're watching Left to Black. We're here with H. Samy Alim, who's the author with Geneva Smitherman of the new book, Articulate While Black, Barack Obama, Language and Race in the U.S. It's published by Oxford University Press. Let me shift gears real quickly, Samy. You did a piece about 9 months ago about occupying language. And of course, we're celebrating the year anniversary of Occupy movement. Talk a little bit about your thoughts about the Occupy movement and what kind of things we can see going forward in terms of taking that spirit, particularly around issues of language, right? And of course, with all these debates about immigration in this country, what's almost on the back burner of those discussions are the way that language, one way or the other, are going to factor into our talks, our ideas about immigration going forward. Yeah,
and absolutely. And this is one of the things that I've tried to do, that Geneva's tried to do for decades now, and that others are trying to do, is we're trying to language the discourse. So when we talk about languaging race, we really want to shift the conversation on race a little bit, make an impact, make a dent, to focus that when people talk about language, when they talk about culture, right, they're talking about race. So we want to view racial politics, the racial politics of the United States, through the lens of language. And that can really tell us where we are and move that dialogue to the next level. So Occupy Language, right, is linked directly to this most recent piece on Obama's English. Right. So for me, talking about language, right, you can talk about the discourse, how Occupy shifts the discourse, right? We're talking about the 1%, the 99%, right? This critique of capitalism has now entered the public discourse in a way that it hadn't in a long time. It's one of the things that Angela Davis said when she was here at Stanford not too long ago, right? This discourse is transformative and has a transformative potential. So now what if we occupied language and started taking control of that discourse, right, in ways that empowered racial minorities, that empowered immigrants, et cetera, that gave us a different way to link the discussions in looking at what Barack Obama does with language, for example. Because that to us was, as we wrote in the New York Times piece not too long ago, we wanted to say that the way Barack Obama talks, right, is pointing the direction forward for political candidates. If you want to govern, if you want to run the United States of America in a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multilingual society, right, your mono style, which Romney actually is pretty monostylistic according to all accounts. He can't really shift in and out. Right. He has one gear and he stays in it. And which ironically was something that George Bush actually did, very successfully, though folks didn't pick up on it, right? It's like, and this is not even partisan, right? So George Bush was able to kick it a little Southern. Yeah. He was able to kick a little Spanish, right? He was able to do these things, even a couple of discourse markers here and there that just tipped people off. Yeah. That he was a regular guy, that he was folksy, right? And that got him a lot of support. Romney is not able to do that. So I think in terms of occupying language, what we have is occupying and re-socializing people into an understanding of language as multiple, right? As we are multiple, we're multiracial, et cetera. Right. So language must also respond to the times. It must respond to the politics of the times and of the day. We've been joined this afternoon by Professor H. Samy Alim, who's a professor of education, anthropology, and linguistics at Stanford University, where he also directs the Center for Race, Ethnicity, and Language and the Institute for Diversity. He's the author of several books, including You Know My Steez, an ethnographic and social linguistic study of style shifting in the Black American speech community, that's Duke University Press, 2004. Rock the Mic, the Language of Hip Hop Culture, Routledge, 2006. And the co-author with the legendary Geneva Smitherman of the brand new book, Articulate While Black, Barack Obama, Language and Race in the U.S., and that is published by Oxford University Press. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, Samy. Welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined this afternoon by Ms. Allison Crockett, singer, songwriter, provocateur, who has recorded many projects, including That's Where You Go from 1999,
Wow.
On Becoming a Woman, which was the CD I was first introduced to your work, but also Bear from 2007, which was criminally, you know, folks didn't get a chance to hear that. That's an album that should have been played on everybody's R&B station, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, your new recording, Mommy, What's a Depression, which was released 2012. She's also the curator of the website, the blog, Diva Against Insanity. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me.
So one of the things that strikes me, Allison, about your career and your music is your accessibility. You know, at a time when artists are accessible on Twitter and social media, you always get the sense they're accessible because they're trying to sell records or they're trying to push their brand. But you're present on social media in a way that, you know, folks can actually get the chance to talk to you and question you. And of course, your blog is an extension of that, you know, where folks, you know, they don't have to try to unpack what's going on in the music. You're telling them how you feel about what's going on in the world directly. So talk a little bit about this combination of doing the music piece, but also deciding to expand out into the world of social media.
Well, you know, I've always been, you know, when MySpace came out, Lord, MySpace.
Long time ago. Long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And it was clunky and kind of inefficient, but you started to be able to interact with fans in a very personal way. And not just come from artist to fan, but person to person. And that's where I got the idea, is actually to do Bear to begin with, because fans were asking me, person to person, we like it when you sing and play. Could you do that? So I said, oh, well, yes, I could. And so when Twitter and Facebook, and I didn't want to do Facebook to save my life. I didn't want to do it, but I said, okay, I'm going to try Facebook. And I found the nice thing about Facebook is, again, relating to people in a personal way. What I've found that everybody's a mom, or everybody has a mom, or is a grandparent, or is an aunt or an uncle, or has been a kid. So we're all pretty much in the same place. And my music has always been about where it is that I am at that moment. So when I did on Becoming a Woman, it was about me literally becoming a woman, not just about, you know, just random love things. It's about how I became an adult with all the things that came about to be. And so with Mommy, What's a Depression, it came about that I just wanted to talk about different things that were going on in my life and that were going on in the world around us. It actually came out of my brothers and my conversations on the phone after watching Meet the Press and saying, what the hell is wrong with those people? What's going on here? And I think, and well, what true pertaining is that we've never lost a civil war, and and all these different things that we were talking about. And so we decided to kind of make a record about that conversation, using the loves of my life, which are funk, R&B, and soul, and jazz, and straight ahead jazz, and kind of jumbling them up with dance music and technology. And after we did the record, I found that there were so many things that I wanted to say about it. I started talking about how it came about and how I started putting it together. And then, as you know, the presidential election has been going on, and all the things that have been happening that were just like what was going on in the record, I just decided to kind of write about it. And that's what I did, because I thought that it would give an insight, just like you said, an insight into the record, which is basically a picture of our society. And each blog for me is kind of like a picture of what's going on in my head. And it's not just about politics, but it's about culture, it's about education, it's about being human and what it means to be human. So that's where the blog came from.
You mentioned all of your musical loves, and you know, I was fortunate enough to review the latest recording, Mommy, What's a Depression? And one of the things that struck me is that, you know, it's really hard to categorize you as a singer. You know, it's jazz, but it is also R&B. It's also hardcore funk. It's all these different kinds of elements. How difficult has it been you trying to find an audience, right? And not even so much trying to find an audience, because folks are going to love you because you're great, but really trying to get, you know, venues and radio stations and all the other kind of folks who have their hands in the music industry to understand what kind of artist you are when they are so desiring to pigeonhole artists into one particular genre and one particular style.
It takes effort. What it takes are people like you and people in the radio industry and in the internet industry, internet radio, and bloggers, and just people saying, wow, this speaks to me. Yeah. So it's difficult, but we're going about it in different channels through internet radio, internet blog talk radio, and doing the blog as well, just reaching people where they're sitting, because it is difficult, especially in the Black community. We like to say, you do hip hop, you do this kind of music, you do R&B, you do this. And the only things that you're allowed to talk about are making money, getting sex, having a love affair, breaking up from that love affair, getting revenge for that love affair, saying that I'm falling in love. There's pretty much nothing else that we're allowed to speak about. And I chose to just say, well, no, we're going to speak about issues. We're going to speak about not love, yes. On this particular record, no, but I really wanted to talk about my friend who was depressed. And I've been depressed clinically. Yeah. And, you know, and my friend was clinically depressed on medication. We don't talk about that. And we need to have conversations about that. And so I've just been reaching out person to person, club to club, musical venue to musical venue, just trying to say, take a listen, because it's not just about the music. The music is great. I love music. But it's also about what we're here to talk about, and about our humanity, and how we can have conversations to continue our humanity and deal with the issues that are happening, and to not sweep them under the rug someplace, so that we can actually have things happen as opposed to not have things happen.
You're watching Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined this afternoon by Ms. Allison Crockett, who is a singer-songwriter and provocateur. It just seems like a nice added description of the kind of work that you do. One of the things I loved about all of your work, but particularly this latest album, you know, you mentioned the kind of lack of range of issues that Black artists can really talk about. And that's particularly a finer point when it comes to women artists. One of the things that's striking about your new album is the fact, your new CD, is that it does speak to where women are, where a Black woman might be at this particular moment, at a time where Black women are visible all over the place, right? In terms of popular culture and mainstream media, very rarely do we actually hear what Black women think and how they feel in any complex kinds of ways. And you bring us some of that complexity.
Well, that's what I want to do. When my first record on Becoming a Woman was talking about, you know, nappy, because that was real. Like, I really, the words of that song is, when my hair was straight, I felt I was not pretty. I mean, it's not poetic. That's really what happened. And so when I started looking at this record, when I picked the songs that I wrote, I wanted to talk about real issues. Black women are not monolithic. We don't just talk about our hair. We don't just talk about relationships. Many of us are struggling for jobs. When we have a job, we have to make sure that we have food on the table, and we have to take care of our kids. I mean, when I finish with working today, I have to take my child to swim class and pick up the other child from daycare, and then I've got to write out bills for the next month, and I've got to figure out what I'm going to do. Meanwhile, the next day I've got a gig, and I've got to put together daycare for, care for them at night, and figure out how that's going to work. And then my mother, who is 75, God bless her, is, you know, I've got to make sure that she's okay, and I've got to stop over at her house, and then I have an et cetera, et cetera. And women think about much larger issues than just love, relationships, and, oh, I'm feeling a little down today, and I'm gonna go out and party. You know, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But there just needs to be some balance, and I just chose to throw the balance in this direction.
One of the things you do on all of your recordings is that you do these covers, and on Becoming a Woman, the Janet Jackson cover, When I Think of You, and that actually is one of my favorite Janet songs, so you did it some incredible justice in that regard. And of course on Bear, there's your cover of Love is Stronger Than Pride, by Sade. This recent album, you covered Donny Hathaway's Sack Full of Jeans. Talk a little bit about what you're thinking about when you're looking for songs to cover.
I look for songs I like.
Yeah.
It's honestly just that simple. I love Janet Jackson. I think her work ethic, her beauty, her voice, her danceability, I just love everything about her. And when I did Sade's Love is Stronger Than Pride, I was in my jazz age, and I had to have all sorts of different chord changes, and Sade, Schmade, and then I listened to the record, and I said, that's a beautiful record.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just, dude, oh, I love that. That's so pretty, and I used to sing that all the time. And when I was dealing with Donny Hathaway, I learned how to play and sing by playing with Donny Hathaway.
Wow.
And my father knew Donny Hathaway, and apparently he used to come over to the house, and they used to play together occasionally. My father played piano and played saxophone as well. And so there was a personal connection, because I listened to music through no fault of my own or no cause of my own, because my father was a jazz pianist, and he played music at concert level loudness at night for 8 hours a night. See me in the club sleep, you'll understand that no amount of loudness can keep me asleep. If I want to go to sleep, I go to sleep. But in that, I heard a lot of Donny Hathaway, and the way that my father played music, he played it the way that people speak, and you have to figure out what he was trying to say. And I look at the record, one of the things that I want to sing is some Lou Rawls. I look at the record with Groovy People, and that whole record is a love letter to my mother.
Wow.
I went through it, and I was like, I called my mother up and I said, you need to listen to this record again, because it's all about you. It's all about you and how my father feels about you. And so Donny Hathaway was something that he played pretty consistently. And I learned how to play certain runs on the piano. I'm sitting next to my grandmother's piano right now. I've learned how to play certain runs by listening to Donny Hathaway and certain chord changes. And I learned how to sing certain ways. Actually, on the song Gentrification, I'm singing very much in my own way like Donny Hathaway, trying to kind of pitch my voice in a certain way that he does. And I was very, very influenced by Donny Hathaway and Robert Flack, and that whole vibe and feel, the mixture of jazz and soul, and it not necessarily being one thing, and being a craftsman. And Sack Full of Dreams, I've been singing it since I was in college. And I just love the song. I sang it at my friend's funeral when he died of AIDS. I sang it, I've been singing it for gigs for years and years and years. And it speaks to the hope that we want in the world. Such hard edges, and Sack Full of Dreams is just a nice edge that allows us to look forward.
I want to go back to this notion of the kind of personal connection to some of this music. You record a really stunning version of Isn't She Lovely for Bear. And it's one of those tracks, the original Stevie Wonder version. I have two daughters, and I have memories of them sitting in the car seat and playing the song over and over again, so that when they got the age where they could ask me and tell me what they wanted to hear, that was one of the songs that they always kind of referenced. And then you brought just a whole different kind of tender, and not that Stevie's version wasn't tender and loving, but a really different kind of interpretation of it. And I can't imagine that you didn't record that without dealing with your own moment of becoming a mommy and becoming a parent.
Oh, gosh. That song was originally supposed to be a broken beat drum and bass song.
Oh.
I was going to do it like that. My brother said, no, you play it. No, that won't be what I want. Sit down and play it. Okay. And I did. And frankly, when I played it for audiences, they really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And it was right after I had my first daughter. And also, to go back to my father, it was the song he played for me. It was just, whenever it came on, I said, that's my song.
Yeah.
And I knew who it was for. He never said it, but the family knew it was my song. So it was just, it was a connection that I had. And so whenever I think about that song, it's about my father, it's about my first daughter. We recorded, and there was, when I did Baby Smile along with it, I just remember as a new parent, when you first know that your child is smiling and it's from sheer happiness, not just from gas. And I mean, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
It's life-changing. And I sang it at a performance, and my daughter had a 103-degree temperature, and I was so upset, and I still had to work. But I mean, it's such a connection to me from my past and to my present and to my future, and I just love the song.
What are you listening to these days, Allison?
Oh gosh. Believe it or not, I'm listening to Pandora. I'm listening to new things because I'm listening to Gregory Porter.
Oh, yes.
Gregory Porter right now. I'm listening to Bjork again, and because I really love the kind of angular way that she sings. I'm listening to some Nancy Wilson. I just listened to a record with Stephen Sondheim, and I've had to play it over and over again, just the way she hit a certain, it was just so beautiful, and I just played it over and over again, and I'm in my car, and I'm going like this. I'm just enjoying it so much. I like to listen to a lot of jazz right now. That's a lot of stuff, a lot of Alice Coltrane and John Coltrane and some Wayne Shorter. Listen to that a lot right now. And but I just listened to some Usher and some Lady Gaga. I was like, yeah. Kind of boy. There's just so much stuff out there that's so interesting and so unique. And I was listening to my friend Deborah Bond's record, which is brilliant, which is lovely. There's just a lot of stuff out there.
What do you listen? What do you let your daughters listen to?
I'm pretty lucky. My eldest daughter is afraid of a lot of things. Movies, and so she's into a lot of cartoons, and so she listens to a lot of the music that's on there, and she dances, and some of the pop music that she gets from her dance class, and Adele, and I mean that's there, but pretty much she listens to what I listen to in the car, because I'm a parent that believes, like my parents, this is my car.
Right. My radio, my stereo.
Your car, you could put whatever you want. So also, by me listening to the news, now that my daughter is 8, she can actually start asking questions. And that's where the album's name came from, Mommy, What's a Depression? Because my daughter wanted, they're talking about depression.
What is it? Yeah.
And so my daughter's asking, well, what's the development when I started talking about a housing development and where we live?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I want her to ask questions about what's going on in the world. She doesn't have to know every single thing, but she should have some knowledge of what's going on.
Yeah. We've been joined this afternoon by Miss Allison Crockett, singer-songwriter, who's recorded several projects, including That's Where You Go from 1999, On Becoming a Woman, 2003, Bear, my favorite, from 2007, and Mommy, What's a Depression, which was just released, 2012. She's also the curator of the website, the blog, Diva Against Insanity. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, Allison.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Eric, you're a real life G for this one. Yeah. All black everything. All black, you know. All black in the name of all my black heroes. All black everything. All black polos. All black medallions, yeah. All black, you know, say. All black everything. All black, you know. All black in the name of all my black